Good morning. My name is Richard Wexler, and this is Caring in America, the podcast for caregivers and care recipients. So, folks, on a snowy Friday morning where I live in Idaho, wanted to talk to you about, again, why I started doing this 17 plus years ago, why we launched APlan2Age, really trying to get the point across of how dramatic care can be in someone's life, whether it's that person getting the care or family members, friends, acquaintances who are providing the care. So as we've talked about a lot, married later, 2 small kids, 11 and 7, working in the software industry, 4 parents in their 80s. Yeah, we knew they were in their 80s. We thought they were doing pretty well. It turned out they weren't. So I get asked, why didn't you guys talk about this? Well, they had their estate plans done. That's awesome. But we never really talked about what's going to happen if they need care. Are we gonna hire someone? Are they gonna move to an assisted living? Is someone gonna come in the home? Is that gonna be our responsibility? Never really discussed it. And then the phone calls started happening in the summer of '05 that turned into 4 calls. And now my wife and our kids are looking at each other. What do we do now? The first 2 to get ill were my wife's parents. They made it pretty clear they wanted to stay in their home. What did that mean? Well, they also made it pretty clear they didn't want some stranger coming in from the outside. That meant us. That meant mainly my wife, myself, our 2 kids. So my wife, who had this business from our home, kind of stopped doing that because she was driving, I talked about it, the 40 miles to their home, where we were in the Bay Area. That was, based on traffic, usually a minimum of an hour and a half one way. So it wasn't something you pick up, drive 10 minutes, and you're there. You had to think about it and think about the time of day. And that went on for quite a while. Then all the doctor's appointments, and then in the hospital, and then in skilled nursing, and then back home. And eventually, yes, moving to an assisted living, then a small assisted living, moving to our home. Then you add my parents, who also wanted to stay at home. Now all of a sudden, and that's 40 miles in a different direction, again, minimum an hour and a half one way. We're overwhelmed. But I'm still doing my commute of minimum an hour and a half because I work 40 miles in a different direction to try to make money for the family. But I also knew, and we've talked about this, I was in my early 50s. I had a decent job. I wasn't about to open my mouth at work and say, hey, I'm taking care of all 4 of my parents. I knew there were guys and gals that were 20 years younger than me that wanted my job, that they would probably give the job to them, pay them less, and I'd be forced out the door. So unfortunately, like a lot of people, kept my mouth shut. And unfortunately, that still happens a lot today. So when I met Peter Ross, the co-founder and CEO of Senior Helpers, a year ago, through the podcast, started talking. I brought this crazy subject up that's been bouncing around in the back of my head for a long time. We got to do something bigger. I called it a national conversation about aging. He loved the idea. We had no idea what we were going to do, what we were going to build. All we knew is he had seen this countless times over the 20 years he's been involved in this industry. And the same for me. I'm going to go 99% of the people that I worked with, engaged with, stood in front of, and educated had never talked about this point in their life like my wife and I hadn't. And then all of a sudden, it happens. And I've talked about one is tough enough, especially when you have no plan. So, I mean, how many of you in the listening audience live really close to mom, dad, grandparents? Most of us have moved. We met someone. We moved because of that. We took a job someplace else. We moved because of that. Maybe both. Are we within driving distance? Okay. For a lot of people, 40 miles is an hour and a half. Are we 100 miles away, a few hundred miles away, or as I talk about all the time, a few states away? I've been dealing with so many people that are on one coast and their loved one is on the other coast. What is that? 3,000 miles away? Think about what that means. Think about not only taking the time in that adult child's life that's probably working, has a family, but also the cost, because there was never a comprehensive conversation within the family that I call the family conversation. There was not a plan. Okay, something happens to mom, something happens to dad. And I hear this all the time. Okay, mom fell, she broke her hip. It doesn't seem like that big of a deal. What's it going to take? A couple months? We've talked about this. I broke a femur just about 10 years ago. I really thought 2 to 3 months, I'm 60-ish years of age, I'll be in great shape. It took me 8 months. I was 60. I wasn't 85. I wasn't 90. Just getting through surgery and hopefully not having side effects from the anesthesia can be challenging. Then they're going to get discharged from the hospital. We've talked about this. They don't go to a nursing home. They don't exist. They go to skilled nursing or a rehabilitation center. They're there for 3, 4, 5 weeks. They're trying to stabilize that leg. They get there maybe at the back of an ambulance. They're in a wheelchair. They want them to move to a walker. They want them walking up and down the halls like I had to do on the walker before the doctor is going to say, okay, we can discharge you. Now what? Okay, they're being discharged. We've talked about this. Maybe maybe dad's gone, mom's gone, the other one, they're just going to go home. It's going to be months. If you're 85 or 90, it's probably going to be longer than it took me with my femur. They can't. How do they make food? How do they use the restroom? How do they get, terrible thing to say, but how do they get up and off a toilet that potentially is low to the ground? They need to get the right equipment, so on and so forth. Do they have any understanding about that? Do their children have an understanding about that? How are they going to cook their meals? How are they going to shower? I had to take basically a sponge bath for quite a while on a little sliding stool that you put in the bathtub that you get on one end and kind of slide into the tub, and then when you're done you slide back out. But I needed help getting back up, getting dressed, and most of them do as well. So somehow a meal gets prepared. I learned this the hard way. You're on a walker. How are you carrying that meal to a table in the living room, the dining room table, the kitchen table, whatever, to eat? It's just all these little things. So when Peter and I started talking about what we eventually called a plan to age, it was really around this subject that how do we get 99% of people out there to understand you don't want to wait for the phone to ring. You don't want to wait for a text, email, carrier pigeon, whatever, that something happened to your older loved one. You want to make a plan. What if you do live on one coast and your loved ones are on the other? What if you're 3, 4, 5, 6 states away? It's still the time involved, the cost involved, all of that. I mean, hopping on an airplane is, based on how far you're going, can be an all-day event just to get there and an all-day event to get back. So when we started thinking about a plan to age, what did we want to do? We wanted to create 2 pieces of it. The first piece, let's literally teach people how to plan, how to have this conversation with loved ones, what to talk about. And then we've literally put in there what some plans look like, and then a blank form that you can fill out and download with your own personal plan. But like anything, that needs to be updated. So you do one now, fantastic. And nothing happens to mom, dad, grandparents for 6 months, a year, or 2 years. You're going to want to update it. There's probably been changes in their life, your life, etc. But we also realized, let's say I've talked about this is going great in 10 years. The reality is most people will still deal with this in crisis. So we wanted a segment of a plan to age to provide the guidance, to provide someone to talk to help you through this, and to provide the resources. So planning, but also if you're already in crisis, trying to really make it simple, trying to really make it easy, and provide what you need. Currently, we're building our advisory council. What's that? We currently have 3 members of the council. We're hoping to get about 12 to 15. We just started. Those are going to be leaders in the healthcare space, senior care space, financial space, estate planning space, of the legal community, and much more. Our plan is to have the national conversation about aging once a quarter, where the public will be invited. We want to understand what they like, what they don't like, what's working, what's not working. And we want to take those ideas and suggestions and maybe complaints to these leaders who can then make changes. I keep bringing up numbers. It's almost a third of our country is over 50. We're aging. The oldest boomers, I'm smack in the middle, born in 1953. The oldest, born in 46, they turn 80 next year in 26. Next year. 10 months. Think about that. The oldest boomers are going to be 80. And unfortunately, what I've seen, and a lot of people that I work with in the senior care industry, the boomers haven't taken care of themselves the way their parents did. Let me repeat that. The boomers haven't taken care of themselves the way the boomers did. Overweight, diabetes, a lot of other issues. They're needing care sooner. I've walked through so many assisted livings, and the average age has always been mid to late 80s. We're seeing that come down dramatically, where people need care. And we've talked about, I think on average, 2.5, 3 years for someone in a care situation, not the 14 I went through, but that's 2.5 to 3 years. And if you're the adult child trying to provide that care, can you rearrange your life? Can you still work? Do you got to leave a job? How are you going to make income for 2.5 to 3 years? And what happens? Maybe you don't get 4, but maybe it's mom and dad. Maybe it's mom and father-in-law. Maybe it's mom and 95-year-old grandpa. Folks, it's reality. Take a look at APlan2Age. Please start using it. Start really thinking, irrespective of how old you are. Are you the 90-year-old listening to this? Are you the 45-year-old adult child? Are you someplace in the middle? Use it. And if you're already in crisis, use it as well. And then what we ask, we want as many people to use this as possible because it's going to help them. This is the foundation. This is a nonprofit that we're building. This is to help folks. Please use it. Please share it. If you have websites, put it on your website. You're on social media, whatever social media it is, put it on there. Tell people about it in everyday conversations. When you go to your doctor's office, irrespective of what that doctor's specialty is, tell them about this. We need everybody understanding. I thank you, folks. I thank you for listening. We're going to have some interesting conversations upcoming, have some guests lined up. So once again, thank you. Use APlan2Age. Pass it on to someone else. Make this point in your life easier. It wasn't easy in ours. And for a lot of people, it's not easy. And I tell people, let's try and make it easier. Let's get ahead of this. Folks, have yourself a great day. And until we talk again, make that an awesome day. Bye.